Hey everybody, today we are talking about Esperanza Renace by Pam Munoz Ryan. So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to read a book in Spanish. I've been trying to get better at my fluency in the language, and I wanted to set a goal for myself, and so I thought, why not read a book that I really enjoyed reading when I was a kid, and that was Esperanza Rising. And so I found Esperanza Renace in a Barnes & Noble like 2.5, 3 years ago, and was like, okay, here's my goal. And the year passed, and I really wanted to read it in November, and that's my birth month, and so I just wanted that to be my goal. November came and went. I didn't think I was ready. The next year came. November came and went. I still didn't think I was ready. This past November, though, I decided no more excuses. I should know enough to be able to get my way through this, and I just need to do it. I can't just continue to push it off and hope that I'll be ready the next year. And part of learning is doing and actually practicing. And so this was still quite a challenge for me because I still had a lot of words to learn and still do, and the grammar is not my friend, and so a lot of times I would have to remind myself, okay, this is probably just past tense and you know this word and it's just the past tense form, things like that. And so I continued to read, and anytime I came across something I didn't know, I just looked it up. And so I feel like where I'm a little bit better at my Spanish is through reading. I think that I am fairly good with the pronunciation and can speak it okay, but when it comes to the proper grammar to use when I'm forming a sentence, I'm weaker at that. So I always thought that I'd be able to figure it out easier if I just was reading it. And so I went ahead and started my book in November, and it's March now, and so it took me a long time. I took a little pause on it to read some holiday books and things like that, but then picked it back up in February and was like, okay, I'm not reading anything else until I finish this. And now I finished. So I'm going to tell you about the book, how I read it, how my understanding of it from reading the Spanish version of it. So if I say something that's like, that's not actually what happened, feel free to correct me because I might have just translated it incorrectly. And it's been years since I read the English version. I was like a child the last time I read this. So Esperanza, she lives with her family in Mexico on her father's ranch, the Rose Ranch, El Rancho de las Rosas. And Esperanza and her family, because of her father owning the ranch, are pretty wealthy, and so they have servants. One of the servants, Miguel, is close to her in age, and they're really close friends, but in the very beginning, Esperanza basically shoots down any potential for anything further than friendship because they're from two different sides of the river, so to speak, because of their status. Her birthday is coming up and they're going to have a big celebration. One night, unfortunately, Esperanza's father does not return home at the time he usually does, and so they send out a search party, and her uncles come back, and turns out that her father was killed in a like a bandit robbery, something like that. And so this is of course devastating to her, especially at the time that it happens. And basically one of her uncles goes to her mom and says, hey, so because of this, I think we need to get married, and we will own the ranch together, and we will continue to thrive in this way. And the mom doesn't want to do it. She denies it at first. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And of course Esperanza's like, you can't just like dad just passed. You cannot just go off and marry his brother. Because of this, her uncle, both of the uncles are very like powerful people. Like one owns a bank, one's the mayor, I'm pretty sure. Turning down his proposal he brushed it off as like, okay, well, that's all right, but continue to think about it, and we'll see each other soon. He does not take this news lightly and ends up burning down the ranch and the house. And luckily nobody is harmed, but the harvest and the ranch and all the things, the workers are going to be out of a job now, all of this stuff, basically they're left with nothing. And so because of this, of course, they don't admit that it was them that burned down the place. They're like, oh, this is so unfortunate. Have you thought about my proposal? Because now really you don't have anything left. So what else is there to do but take my proposal? So, I mean, you're not going to be able to live off of it this now. Like you've lost your income. She agrees. Esperanza freaks out like, you can't do this. But it turns out her mom was just saying that so that they could sneak away in the night and go to America and escape from their from Esperanza's from her tios, and not having to have this proposal happen. And so they travel and they're able to get in for work. They have Miguel and Alfonso and Hortensia. They're all the previous servants of Esperanza's family. And so she says they have family. Alfonso has family in California, and so says we'll be able to get in so we can just work on these different camps. And so they go in and they start working, and Esperanza has a really hard time getting used to this new life and having to do things like as simple as laundry because she's never had to do them before. So she slowly starts to get better at these chores and things, and eventually ends up having to go to work because her mother gets this disease, condition, illness. I can't remember what it's called, but it has to do with the dust. There's a dust storm that happens, and she was outside for too much of it and inhaled too much of the dust, and affected her lungs, and they were not even sure she was going to be able to survive from it because she's just not acclimated to that kind of weather and that kind of inhalation of dust and stuff like that. And so Esperanza has to go to work in place of her mother so that she can get more money to survive for themselves, but also to bring her abuela over, because her abuela this whole time was stuck still in Mexico because during the fire she like twisted her ankle and wasn't able to walk properly. And so she's like, I'll just slow you down. It won't be safe for me to go right now. I will stay with the nuns here, and when I'm feeling better, then I'll come over. And they knew that her tios were probably going to be watching for a long time and making it hard for her abuela to come over. And so Esperanza was still like, I'm going to try my best to figure out a plan to get her to send money over in some kind of way that her tios aren't going to know that the money is coming from there, so that they can't like be traced to where they are. So it's like really tricky situation, but ultimately she wants what's left of her familia to be together. And so she's trying, the end goal is always to try to get her abuela to join them in California and be able to start a new life. And there's a lot of struggles that Esperanza goes through of you know, this isn't fair and we should be treated better, but, and you know, a lot of things like that. So typical of her to complain when she's never known anything but her blissful life. And Miguel is there to kind of, they have an argument to just say, listen, Esperanza, because she's like, how is this any better than if we had just stayed where we were and just dealt with my uncles and stuff? And Miguel's like, for me, this is, I have many opportunities now. Now, isn't it possible that we can be on the same side of the river now instead of opposite sides? And so she's left with a lot to think about, and what her priorities should be moving forward, and if she really can eventually thrive in this life, even though she's getting, you know, she's a child working, first of all, and also she's getting underpaid, and their living conditions are not ideal. They have really small home that they live in. It's just basically like a bedroom and a kitchen, and that's like it. There are strikers. There are people that are going on strike because they believe that they need to get better paid for their work. And so there's all this stuff that's also going on at the same time. I just really liked reading this again. It was a little nostalgic for me just from when I read it when I was a child. I have a better appreciation for it now, just like reading it in Spanish and realizing that it's written based on the author's grandma and her family members, and what they actually, a lot of what they went through is in this book. I thought it was interesting when I was reading it, and it's saying how Esperanza feels really frustrated because she doesn't understand the people around her that are speaking in English, and she doesn't like feeling like she doesn't know what's going on. And it made me think about how that's kind of how I was feeling when I was reading this book, having to have my laptop open to like translate any words I came across that I was like, okay, I can't figure this out. And so it made reading this book take like 4 times longer than if I had read it in English. And it also made me reflect on how the students that I teach at school, a lot of them, their first language is Spanish. And so they're going through the same thing that I am, just in the reverse, of feeling like they're trying to catch up and having to constantly translate in their heads and try to figure out what their classmates are trying to tell them. And, you know, they're at the age, like a lot of them are 1st and 2nd graders trying to figure out how to read. And now they have to try and read in English, even though they don't hardly even know how to speak it. And so they're having to learn very rapidly. I'm sure that they are grasping it easier than me because they're like, they have to be a part of it every single day, every hour that they're at school. They are surrounded with it, and so they're probably latching on to it and learning more quickly. But still, I'm sure that it is so much of like a struggle for them, like, and exhausting. Like, it did feel several times where I was just like, oh my goodness, it's like, it feels mentally exhausting just to read 2 pages when I get to a certain section where I'm like, okay, I think I understood all that, but there's still 2 words I'm not positive, so better look it up. And it took, yeah, a long time, which is why I hesitated to start, but I am glad that I did it. And there were several instances where I was able to read like full paragraphs and be like, yeah, I understand exactly what's going on right now. And those are really successful moments for me that felt really good. I do think it would be interesting to perhaps read this again in like another 1.5 years or so, continue to work on my Spanish up until, you know, like continually, and then see if I can read it quicker, you know, reading it a second time, if there's more things that I can grasp and remember from this first time read that can improve my reading the next time I give it a go. I think that would be really cool. Or picking up her other book that she's written that I remember I also had as a kid. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It's about another young girl, Naomi, I think. And so maybe in 2 years, instead of reading this, or 1 year, maybe picking that one up instead and trying that one. But it would be interesting to just stick with the same book and see if I can understand more the second time around. But yes, I'm glad that I pushed myself and then I did it. And I do just want to continually improve my Spanish for people in my own family, and also for the kids that I teach, and being able to communicate with them in their home language. And yeah. So anyways, have you ever read something in a language that was not your first language? Let me know if you have. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.